everyone. Welcome to The Search Bar, the podcast built for law firm growth. I'm your host, Eric Ritter. With over 12 years in the legal industry, I've seen firsthand what it takes to grow a law firm, from digital visibility to team leadership systems and building that kind of strategic referrals that fuel long-term success. At my agency, Digital Neighbor, that's exactly our mission, helping law firms grow holistically by combining marketing with the operational clarity that drives sustainable results. And if your law firm needs to attract more leads, close more cases, and scale with confidence, you're in the right place. And if you're ready to implement what you hear today, book a free discovery session through our Motion for Marketing Success system at digitalneighbor.com/motion, or check the link in the show notes. Now to today's episode. I'm super excited because it's all about scaling with confidence, how to lead effectively, delegate wisely, and build the operational structure your law firm needs to truly thrive. My guest is Dominic Grew, founder of Elevate Business Coaching. He's based in Boston, Massachusetts, and Dominic works exclusively with attorneys to help them lead with vision, manage with confidence, and grow with intention. Dominic, welcome so much to The Search Bar. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, and before we get into it, first, some people's favorite part, which is my wine recommendation here at the Search Bar. So for today's conversation, since we're talking about leadership, strategic delegation, I really recommend pairing it with a balanced, structured Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, because it's complex enough to reflect through thoughtful strategy, yet smooth enough to embody confident leadership. So let's dive in. So we talked a little bit previously, Dominic, so I know mindset is really important to growth in the legal space. So really want to start there at the beginning, right? So your company, Elevate Business Coaching, it's my understanding that you focus on coaching law firms. What inspired you, because I know before that you were maybe in a different industry. So what inspired you to kind of shift into this niche?
Yeah. That's a great question, Eric. And believe it or not, it's the one that I get asked most often, because you're right. I'm not a lawyer. I have no legal background. My background was in the financial services and investment management industry. So this switch that I made was totally different. Yeah. But I have carved out a niche working with law firms. And the more that I've kind of niched into that particular segment, if I can use that term, the more I've become really interested in the legal profession, with all the different varieties and all of the different dynamics that the legal profession has. And in some respects, I won't say it is unique, but there's definitely some really unique characteristics about the law firm industry and how it's structured and what that means then for the business of law.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. Similar to me as well, with marketing, I kind of found my way into the legal space a little bit differently. I was actually a marketer, and then I started working in-house as a digital marketing director and kind of learned all the in and outs of the intake department and the cases and the retainers. And I just thought that was so fascinating, so kind of came into it, and kind of also all the different, like every practice area is a little different, right? Yeah. They're looking for different things. And so let's talk about that a little bit more. Legal professionals, in your line of work, what are some of the biggest maybe barriers in the mindset that you see lawyers facing when they're trying to grow their practice and scale?
Yeah, that's I love that you're starting with mindset, because, that's kind of like the core, especially with the work that I'm doing with my clients. And it's also one of the reasons why people say, why on earth would you ever choose to work with lawyers? They're really difficult to work with. You find it really challenging to manage a business. But, just thinking about the legal profession and how, what they've been trained to do. So lawyers have been to law school, and they are trained to be critical thinkers, which is a terrific skill set to have. That's why the clients are paying them the big bucks. They want them to be critical thinkers, think through options, problems, things that we might not even think about. The lawyers always has that critical thinking hat going on, which is terrific as a lawyer. But that can sometimes be a little bit of an impediment when it comes to managing a business, growing a business. So one of the first things that I need to kind of work through my clients is their mindset. So what has served them well in their profession as a practitioner can sometimes hold them back when it comes to actually owning a business, which many of those lawyers, they are lawyers, but they are business owners too. So that mindset of kind of having to switch hats is one thing that very often I've got to kind of, in my conversation say, we got to pause for a second. You got to take off the lawyer hat. Think about this, not what couldn't happen, but what if it could happen? So having them actually think, dream a little bit, because one thing that I found, Eric, is that lawyers are about risk, critical thinking, and very often, they'll just err on the side of inaction, right? They're not risk takers. And if they're not quite sure what's the best road to take, they'll actually do nothing.
Wow.
Right?
Okay. So you got to be absolutely certain.
Yeah. And the reality is, nothing's ever certain. And lawyers don't work in certainty either with the law, right? But just generally speaking, they tend to be cautious because that serves them well, and critical thinking, and that serves them well, but that doesn't always serve them well when it comes to actually being the business owner and thinking about things like managing people and managing client relationships and all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah, no, fantastic answer, and agreed. Kind of that mindset and being able to kind of, take off that lawyer hat sometimes to be the business owner. And I think that's not just in legal profession; that's probably all professions, right? Where you kind of start out and you're really good at what you do, but in order to grow the business, you need to have kind of clarity what you want to do as a leader. And I think that's really essential in the legal field. Can you talk about that a little bit more, kind of your philosophy on kind of working with lawyers on their leadership clarity?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. One of the things when I'm working with them, I always want to know, like, how did you become a lawyer and why did you specifically choose employment law or, trust in the estates planning? Because I'm always trying to find out, what's their path, and that then leads to, what do they want to do with their business, right? And that this is the thing about clarity, because what they want from their business actually impacts everything, right? Are they going to hire? Are they going to have multiple locations? Are they going to have a marketing strategy? Are they going to? It all comes back to what it is that they want from their business, right? For example, if I am speaking with somebody and they just want to do residential real estate transactions, and they simply want to do it within, I don't know, a 25-mile radius of where they live. That's totally fine, and that may be as much as they want for their business, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, right? But others might have bigger plans for the business. Maybe they're in an area of the law where federal regulations apply, and they want to have a national practice, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm working with my clients, I got to kind of figure out, what is it that they want? And sometimes that means having a conversation about that, because believe it or not, sometimes when I ask that question, they haven't actually thought about what they want from their business. They want a big firm, a small firm, how much they want to make, how much they want to work, when do they want to retire, all that sort of stuff. And that's all part of the equation. So working through clarity about what you want is really important and really foundational.
That's so interesting, right? Because a lot of times, like as the owner or someone who's stuck in the business, you don't have the time to think about where am I actually going with this, right? What's my goal? What's my objective? So I think that's such an important place to start, kind of looking at that growth potential, even like where do you want to take this, And so when you help firms, because I've worked with coaches in the past, talked to coaches, and a lot of them kind of have a system, right? And I'm like, hey, we need to implement EOS, or we need to work on this structured system. So in your approach, how do you balance like something that's more structured, maybe some flexibility in a law firm, because each law firm is a little bit different, right? Because you're working with billing systems, staff communication, all kinds of different areas. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, no, that is a great question. It's funny as you're saying it, I'm kind of laughing back to myself, because when I started my own firm, I didn't necessarily niche in with lawyers. And, I had a very regimented system. And today I totally changed that. I found it doesn't resonate so well with lawyers. Maybe that's because very often people come to them, they see themselves as the expert and they don't want a cookie cutter. So I'm very much, I'm a customized, bespoke person. I kind of wrap everything around the individual firm or managing partner or whoever it is. And the way that I think about it, Eric, is there can't be one size fits all. So I find this, even if I had two identical estate planning firms across the street from each other in Orlando, they went to the same school, they came out at the same time, they had the same target, they're still going to be different firms because they're different people with different history and they want different things from their from their practice. So the way that I kind of approach it is just thinking about where they are. I think of this idea of a staircase. If we were talking about marketing, I would say, well, let's not start on step number 9, where we're talking about paid per click ads. And let's just start at step number 1. Do you know what marketing is?
Right. Yes. You got to meet them where they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a website? Do you have a LinkedIn profile? So I kind of find out where they are and base it around that. One of the other things as well that I although in my firm name, Elevate Business Coaching, I don't just do coaching. Okay. I also do consulting. I also do training as well. And it's kind of like having a toolbox. Coaching is the one that I use the most. But very often it might be something as simple as, hey, it sounds like you have an idea of what you want from your business. You have this plan in your head, but it's never actually made it out of your head, being articulated, memorialized on paper and shared. So maybe it's not a coaching exercise. Maybe our exercise is just to work together to help you figure out your business plan.
Yeah.
Right? That might be a consulting project. So I guess to answer your question, it's always customized based on what they want and need. And if they don't know what they want or need, I'll ask them questions about, well, what's your budget look like? How much time do you have to devote to this? How important, how urgent is this? Is this something like you need to act on straight away? How much time have we got? And based on all of those factors, I'm going to come up with a recommendation. Sometimes it might be, hey, we should have a few sessions, put together a business plan. Sometimes it might be, there's some work involved in this. We've got to define it, articulate it, lay out the steps, and actually manage through it. And that would be a longer engagement. So I have no shortage of materials that I've developed with other clients. No shortage at all. But it's more about kind of learning about the client, first of all. What's unique to that law firm? At the end of the day, what do they want? And why aren't they there already?
Yeah. Great point and great questions to ask, right? Kind of meeting them where they are, customizing it, right? So still having that proven system and that success system, but being flexible because each individual is different, right? Each attorney, each lawyer you're working with. So working with so many attorneys and lawyers, I'm sure you know what a modern law firm should look like, at least on the inside, right? So in your opinion, Dominic, what does kind of that operational excellence maybe on the inside look like for a modern law firm that our listeners, our viewers at home could strive towards?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to run a law firm without having that plan that I mentioned, right? It's kind of like, if you don't have a good target in mind, how do you know if you're even close to it? So I think, and this doesn't just apply to the legal industry, the modern law firm, you should have your business plan written down, and that includes, your vision, like what would this firm look like? If it was running, if it was ideal, what would that look like? And, how is your firm different from other competitors? What's unique and interesting about your firm? So one of the most important things is to actually spend some time and put it down on paper. It doesn't have to be, and in fact, with my clients, I try to keep it to one page, believe it or not.
Okay.
Because what I found is that I can do nice business plans that are nice and thick, but the reality is what happens then is they end up being put on the top of a cabinet somewhere and they collect dust. So I want them to be referred to and used. So I develop usually it's a one. It might go to 2 pages, but that plan is absolutely essential. If you want to have, that modern law firm, you got to have a plan. You got to know what it is that you're shooting for, and the steps defined of what you need to do to get there. The other thing you need to do is you need to refer to that plan. You can't just do it once. You got to be looking at that all the time, and that's what I really do with my clients. We're talking once, maybe twice a month. How's the plan going? Did you make progress on that? How do if there's metrics, which there usually are, we're talking about those. So if it was outreaches, what did that mean in terms of revenue? If they have a problem with collections, is the accounts receivable going down? If it's to build brand recognition, how are we seeing that show up, right? So you want to have metrics as well. So a business plan, goals, metrics, but the most important thing of all is that you have a process, whether that's internally or using an outside person like me who's going to say, hey, what happened to this? Remember we talked about this last month or 2 weeks ago and we said we were going to come back. So how'd that play out? What does that look like? Are we making progress? Or is it not playing out the way that we thought it would? We need to come up with something else.
Need that accountability buddy, who's kind of keeping you accountable. That's such a good advice. And so the one thing that keeps rattling around my head is it's very proactive having that business plan, right? And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, a lot of the lawyers out there are kind of stuck in that reactive mode, right? Where it's I need to go from one fire to the next, need to solve this. So what kind of advice would you have for them if they're stuck in that reactive mode? How can they switch and kind of begin building that more proactive business plan?
Yeah. They should hire someone like me or like you, Eric. I'm kind of joking, but the reality is, going back to what I said earlier. So, you go to law school, you're schooled in the law, you're successful, you actually get clients, you build a practice, you're hiring people, you're managing people, you're bringing in the business, you're wearing a lot of hats, and you're kind of having to do it and learn it on the fly. I describe it as like you're trying to change a wheel on your car as you're going down the highway, You kind of baptism by fire, and for any person, let alone a legal person, it's really hard to do. So, my advice to someone like that is, you've got to kind of you got to get out of the business and work on the business. And that might sound a little cliche, and you've got to find a way to do that.
Yep.
And going back to the mindset thing, sometimes people will say, well, I don't have time to work in my business. And they don't have time to work on their business, which sounds ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
It's the most important thing that you should be working on, not necessarily like the next case, the next file, the next fire that needs to be put out. At some point, you have to get out of that firefighting quadrant or you'll stay in it. And if you stay in it, what happens is you burn out because, nobody can work it. Even firefighters, right? If you do that for a living, running the burning buildings, they have rest periods. They 2 days on, 3 days off. But in your home firm, you can stay in that zone, and it's not a pleasant place to be. So I mean, I could talk about time management and training, but it's one of the biggest impediments sometimes when I'm working with someone. They just can't see a way to get out of it, and so we start to look at time management, delegation, all sorts of things as to say, well, just like when you go to the doctor, Eric, and you come in and you say, hey, doctor, I've been having these headaches. And the doctor will say, oh, tell me, how long have you had them? How intense are they? What part of the head are they on? Are there things maybe that you've eaten? Are there events that have happened during? So you're asking questions all the time, to try to get more information that you can recommend, a path of action. Because that's not a fun place to be if you're firefighting all the time. And the reality is, you might be doing a great job for your clients, but you're kind of serving yourself last. And it's not a fun place to be.
No, and it makes a lot of sense. If you want to grow, right, it seems like step one, step two is time management and delegation, right? You can't do everything. And that way you can find time to start working on the business plan, start thinking. There's a saying that I've heard before, is you want to work on the business, not in the business, right? Kind of working on the higher level ideas and not just working, writing all the motions and the papers and the briefs and everything, but kind of being able to delegate that and blocking time off your calendar to work on the business.
Yeah. And, it's interesting as well because, I think we all get excited when we hear about growth and everybody wants to grow. But, one of the things that I try to work through with my client, and this might be from my investment background, where I say, well, you can't create more time. Like you only have so much time, and the time that you have is allocated to different things in your life. So maybe say, well, I'm going to really work hard in the business. Okay. So that's probably going to have an impact on your family life.
Yep.
How you spend your free time, your recreation, whether you can go to the gym, all that stuff. So in a way, we're kind of playing around with an allocation exercise, right? All the time. One of the things that I want to know is, well, why do we necessarily need to grow the business? And they might say, well, what do you mean? I might say something, well, what if you could make the same amount of money or maybe even more by doing different types of cases or maybe having different types of clients or not taking certain types of cases? Is that something that you'd be open to a discussion on? Of course, they say, well, yeah, of course I would. I say, well, maybe that doesn't happen overnight, but maybe we could develop a plan whereby I'll take the real estate transaction because that for residential real estate attorneys, that's a volume business. There's no pricing power with it. You can earn a very nice living, but it's seasonal as well, right? Yeah. So again, we get into this thought thing. Well, what if we explored some effort into maybe some different types of practices that would sit alongside, or maybe we don't. Maybe we just decide that we're going to stick in. We're going to go deeper into particular types of matters that are within that field, that are more lucrative, profitable, better use of time. Maybe you just simply enjoy those types of cases more. So it doesn't always have to be about growth. It can be about a reallocation of your energy or your resources. Yeah, just something to think about.
I think that makes so much sense. Kind of having that mindset and kind of being able to shift there as needed. I want to talk a little bit about leadership, right? Because that's a question that comes up a lot. Is when it comes to coaching attorneys, lawyers. I was looking at your website. You talk about visibility, influence. Yeah. What does that mean for a lawyer? Like, how do you define leadership in today's landscape for an attorney or lawyer?
Yeah. And it's so funny because leadership is such a squishy term. Yeah. And sometimes you're thinking about leadership and you're thinking about a Microsoft and a Bill Gates and all that. And it's really, most law firms are really small. I think it's like 70% of law firms. I might have my number. It could be 70% of people work in solo or small law firms, but most of them are like really small. This thing about leadership kind of, it's kind of hard to define it for them. But when I think about it, and I'm, one of the things that I think, so if you're really, investing and developing leadership in your firm, what does that mean, and where does that show up? Where would I go and look? Yeah, to find that. And there's a few things. One is, does the firm run or operate if you're not there? So like, can you take a vacation? Is it the end of the world? If you were to take a 2-week vacation to Europe, do things just totally break down? Because, and again, you own the firm, it's your name on it. You can't just pack up and walk away. But can this thing kind of run without collapsing if you're not around? So that's one of the things. If you've done a good job, it's more likely to do that. If you haven't, then you can't step away. Another thing is staff. Your staff like coming to work? Do they like working at the firm? Again, that's not something that you can easily find out, but sometimes I do with my clients. I'll do like a survey. I just ask the client.
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, do you mind? And again, that could be a training thing. What's it like to work here? Because at the end of the day, you want to have a firm where you're doing terrific work. Your clients love and appreciate the work that you're doing, but people like working there. You've built a brand as to what type of firm you have, and people can actually say, you know what, I might not earn top dollar working with this firm, but it's really fun. There's a great culture. The boss is great. We have fun together. We all know we have to do work, but this place has a lot to offer. And then finally, the other thing about leadership is, and I alluded a little bit to it, is, I mentioned earlier about lawyers being risk averse. Well, I mean, they are doing important work, and it's really hard to delegate, right? It's your name, it's your brand, things can go wrong. So it's easier said than done. But at the same time, if your clients rave about what you've done for them, I think that's also a sign that you have led the organization well. Right. So I kind of said, happy staff are skipping to work every day, and clients who are happy to pay for your services, and because legal services aren't the least, they're expensive, people.
Yeah, they are.
It's really well spent, and if your clients enjoy that or see the value in it, that's great, and the thing doesn't fall apart when you go away. So those are kind of the three things that if I was, talking about leadership, that kind of come to mind for me.
Makes sense. Awesome. Those are all great pieces of advice. One thing I wanted to follow up on, you mentioned that there's so many small or solo firms, right? So what would you say to an attorney who wants to grow a small or solo practitioner firm, but really just feels overwhelmed, right? Because they're just kind of like stuck in this small ecosystem. What kind of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, it's really hard to grow if you're overwhelmed. I'm not a construction expert, right? But think about it. If you had a single family or a single story house, right, and you're thinking of adding, like you want to grow up, so you're going to put another level on, you need to have a good foundation. So and when I think about what I do, I call it building your firm, managing your firm, and then if you do those two things, then you can grow it. So the way that I kind of would approach a situation like that is I need to find out, what's not working, what's not in place at the moment. Because if you're trying to grow something that's not really operating well, you're kind of setting yourself up for some problems. Because what were small problems like, I could use a house as an example, but I'm going to stay away from that. But what are small problems get magnified when an organization gets larger, bigger payroll, bigger client problems, higher stakes, etc. So really, you kind of need to fix things first before you can build onto it. And that's kind of my advice. I'd rather go in and say, well, hey, why have you not been able to grow the firm? Because it sounds like that's your desire, but you haven't been able to do it so far. Let's talk about the things that are holding you back from that.
Right.
Can't find clients. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. What have you been doing? How's it been working? What do you do for marketing, etc. Right? Yeah. Are you working with somebody on that? What do you spend? And so on and so on and so on. But I always want to kind of get the ship right first before you say, let's expand the firm more.
That makes so much sense, right? Because I like how you said it magnifies the problems, right? If it's happening at a micro scale, if once you kind of blow it up, it's just going to be under a microscope and just expand, and just the problems will just multiply from there and snowball.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I love business development. I could do this all day long, talking about how to grow the business. But there's certain things you just got to make sure that they're good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Sure.
But certain things you need to have good enough. And, one of the most important things, because I hear this a lot from clients, they say, well, what's holding you back? And they say, well, I can't find staff, or I can't keep staff, right? Mm-hmm. So again, you can go out and maybe, raise a whole lot of money and bring in business. But if you don't have a team that you can rely on, and you haven't set it up in a way whereby, it's executing well, people are happy to be there, and it works fun, etc., you're going to struggle.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Kind of having a great team in place, like you even mentioned, being able to go on vacation or get away for a little bit. That's only possible if you have a team in place that you can trust. And, that can kind of keep the ship running without the captain on board for a bit.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you disappear for 2 weeks. Right? I give the example of you're in Europe. You can still get up in the morning. The first thing you do is you just kind of check the mail, make sure everything's okay. Right.
Yep.
But what you don't want to be doing is spending 8 hours, right? When you should be with the rest of the family at the Eiffel Tower and you're in the hotel room,
Yep.
Because, It's not operating the way it should.
No, we don't want that to happen. So, in order to not make that happen, let's wrap with your checklist, Dominic, the law firm growth essentials, right? So, you don't want to be stuck in the hotel room when the rest of the family's at the Eiffel Tower. And one way to make that happen is by following the checklist here. It's 5 moves lawyers can make to improve growth, leadership, and operations. So I'll get us started here. I'll read them off, Dominic. Number 1 is audit your time, right? How do you recommend lawyers evaluate where their time is actually going? How do we do that?
I'm going to flip that question. To me, audit is about going back. It's retrospective. With my clients, I flip it the other way, whereby we plan their time. And everyone's going to say, of course we plan the time. But I mean like a budget allocation, right?
Yeah.
So for example, I might say 20 hours a week of doing the work, 10 on business development and 5 on management stuff, right? So you should know what your allocation is in advance, like what you're striving for, right? And then compare notes at the end of the week. Did I hit it or did I not? So I'm about like forward looking versus in reverse. That makes sense.
It does 100%. You can't drive a car looking in the rearview mirror, right? You need to look out. It can inform you, but you still need to be looking ahead. So I really like to plan your time, like figure out how much time you have and then plan it ahead. So do you recommend like calendar blocking, or do you have other kind of systems like that you recommend?
I'm a big fan of calendar blocking. I also know it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for every practice area. Family lawyers and I have many of them, things just come up where they just got to drop and go and do stuff. So again, going back to like, does the one size fit all? Does it be, or do I try to customize? We got to find out what's going to work for the individual. And it may not be perfect, but it just needs to be an improvement.
Yep. That's right. One step at a time.
Yeah.
And one step is number 2 here, clarify your vision. So Dominic, why, again, we talked about a little bit. I just want to concisely go through it here. Why is it important to think beyond just your caseload every day?
Yeah, it goes back to, like everyone's going to have crappy days, right? People in their offices, they have photographs of their kids. Why did they have them there? Because whenever they are there during the day and they're like, why am I doing this? You know what? They want to remember, what's this about? Right? And so in a business perspective, we all get disillusions. We have bad days, things don't work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you wonder, what was I ever thinking about? Why did I ever launch this firm? How can I even imagine growing this? Right? Well, you got to remind yourself. So it's important to step back out and remind yourself what it is that you're doing. What is in the GPS that you're looking to get to?
Yeah.
Right? So it's important to do it just to kind of anchor yourself and remind yourself what it is that you're striving for.
Makes so much sense. And we're moving on to number 3, which I personally think is very important as a business owner myself. Maybe the most important one, quite frankly, is document your systems.
Yeah.
What's the first system you recommend documenting for a law firm?
Accounts payable. Sorry, not accounts payable. Receivables. So
AR, yep. AR.
Yeah, and again, this varies dramatically from practice area to practice area and firm to firm. Yeah. But I have just been blown away by how this gets managed versus in the corporate world where I came from. Money does not get left around in the corporate world. In the legal space, it's too easy just to let things go, and before you know it, you're working for free, or you're only collecting, a fraction of what you're supposed to, because you literally can't run a business unless you have a process for how you're going to collect. Right. So, and again, that's different for every type of firm, but you have to have a process around all of that. So literally anybody could pick it up and say, hey, it's the 3rd day of the month. We're 3 days late. We know on day 3 what happens. Yeah. And do it. So for me personally, that's one that's kind of top of the list.
Got it. Document your systems and start with accounts receivable. Number 4, lead your team with intention. So back to the leadership, right? So what does intentional leadership look like maybe on a day-to-day basis? What could I be doing?
Yeah, you have to know your people, right? And again, in the legal profession, there's this little bit of hierarchy, not a little, a huge hierarchy, right? Between attorneys and support staff. And you've got to know your people, because you rely on them. And so check in with them. Do they know what your vision is? Do they know what it is that you need them as part of the crew to help achieve? Are they bought in?
Love it. Got it. So knowing your people, that's where coming back to having the right people there, and then knowing them, right? And kind of knowing how to lead there. So let's go to number 5, invest in yourself, invest in growth support, right?